Story 1. Pomegranates turn me into a fucking crime scene investigator just for some seeds. Story 2. Croissants. I woke up one morning during lockdown and thought, I am going to make croissants today. I had no idea it was a 2 to 3 day process. They were delicious, but I am not sure I will ever make them again. Story 3. Kreplach. Take a brisket and bake it for a couple of hours. Pull out a wooden bowl and a metal chopper, and spend a long time chopping the meat with plenty of onion. Make and roll out the pasta. Fill and seal each dumpling. Boil until they float. Fry them in butter. Watch your family inhale 18 hours of work in about 10 minutes. Story 4. Baklava. I once made my own and it was so good, but it took all day even with purchased phyllo dough. Story 5. Kuin Amen. It's an amazing pastry that takes about 6 hours to make. My wife makes a batch once a year. Story 6. The amount of stirring required for French onion soup is at carpal tunnel levels, which is why I only eat it when dining out. Story 7. The movie Ratatouille made me think the answer was that dish, but I do not know. Story 8. Apple pie. I have to peel and slice 10 pounds of apples, and my family devours the pie immediately. Story 9. Arancini are fried rice balls usually filled with cheese, meat, and sometimes green peas. They are typically served with a bit of red gravy. They are absolutely incredible but time-consuming to make. Story 10. Ravioli. I once made ravioli from scratch as a project with my daughters, ages 7 and 9. First we minced the pork filling, sliced and fried onions, added herbs, and cooked the mixture on the stove. We made the pasta by hand, mixing flour and eggs until it became a paste and rolling it out with a pasta machine until it was silky. I had a suitable mold, so we filled the mold with spoonfuls of the meat, sealed the ravioli, and cooked them in boiling salted water. In the meantime, we cooked more onions and garden herbs and added 1 kilogram of tomatoes from the vegetable plot. We sieved and reduced this into a thick tomato sauce. Finally, we grated Parmesan, added the ravioli to the sauce, and served it to the rest of the family. Time taken was about 5 hours from start to finish, including washing up. Verdict: really good. Tasted just like the best can produced from Heinz. Never again. Story 11. Sourdough starter. There is so much drama in keeping that thing alive and healthy. I raised a whole human with less drama. Story 12. Artichokes. Anyone? You mean I have to cook this entire pine cone, then nibble at the leaves to get half a wet ration ticket, all the while shoving my fingers in my mouth like a macaque discovering a flea infestation on its genitals? Oh my god. I love artichokes. Let's get the appetizer. Bitch, you don't love artichokes. You like being a problem. Story 13. Thick, creamy tonkatsu ramen. The broth requires 36 hours of cooking, and the rest can be a nightmare too, depending on how far you want to go from making it from scratch. The worst part is that your apartment smells so delicious, but you are not getting any of it for another day. Story 14. Homemade marshmallows seem like they would be outstanding, but they taste the same. Save yourself the effort and disappointment and just buy a bag at the store. Story 15. You know it sounds good? Cinnamon rolls. 2 days later, when you're no longer interested, they'll be ready. Story 16. I once made my own nigiri and rolls at home. Everything was delicious, but I won't do it again. Story 17. Hungarian fish soup. Sajidi version. You must strain the cooked fish through a fine sieve. Last time I made it, it took more than 3 hours, and by the end I had lost my appetite. Story 18. Risotto. I cannot stand and stir for that long more than once a month. The ready-made stuff just does not cut it. Story 19. I am glad others are willing to make and sell tamales to me. Story 20. Eggs Benedict is especially good when you make the hollandaise from scratch. Story kaksikimentaxi. Rosvopaisti. Begin by digging a hole and building a fire in it. Pile wood on the fire and let it burn down to smoldering embers. This will take a couple of hours. Meanwhile, marinate and season a large piece of meat of your choice, such as leg of lamb, pork brisket, or beef. Wrap the meat tightly in aluminum foil and place it in the hole. Fill the hole with sand and build a fire on top. Keep the top fire burning for a couple of hours. Dig out the meat the next day and serve. Story 22. Anything deep fried is a mess to clean up. Bread can be made in a Ziploc bag. Story 23. Mole sauce. I read the ingredients and procedure once. No, life is too short. Story 24. Lobster is incredibly tasty, but cracking the shells, removing all the meat, and cleaning up the mess makes it feel like too much work for a meal. I often wonder if it is really worth all the effort for just a few bites. Story 25. I would love to learn how to make mole, but given the time it would require and the sheer volume of ingredients, I will pass. Story 26. If you wish to bake an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe. Carl Sagan. Story 27. Hickory nuts are really good, but the shells are so intricate that the nut must be dug out with a pick, which is not possible with automated machinery, and each one takes a while. A bag can take hours. There is a reason a small jar costs $20 or more. I miss the hickory brittle my dad used to make. Story 28. I love gumbo, but to make it properly, it takes at least 6 hours. I don't have that kind of time. Story 29. Fresh elderberry jam. The stems are poisonous, so you have to remove every little piece. We spent 7 hours on the berries before even getting to the jam process. Damn good, though. Story 30. Paella has an ingredient list that is half a grocery store. Requires a large specialized pan, takes a lot of preparation, and needs constant attention when cooking because it is very easy to ruin. A good paella, however, is nearly life-changing. Story 31. I found ramen deceptively complex to make. It is not just noodles in broth. From simmering bones for hours to develop a rich stock, to slow-cooking pork belly until tender, to carefully timing sous vide eggs for a perfect yolk, every element demands time, precision, and patience before they come together in one bowl. I'll just buy a bowl of ramen. Story 32. Looking at you, crab legs. I spent $80 and 2 hours on dinner, walked out reeking of butter with seasoning on my hands, and still needed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before dinner because it was not enough to fill me up. Story 33. Mei Kai Ko Ro. Pork belly with fermented mustard greens. I thought I was getting pork belly with American barbecue sauce when I first ordered this. It blew my mind. After the other customers left the restaurant, my mouth has been sad ever since. I don't even know where to get the ingredients. I realized while writing this that I can ask a family nearby that I know. I hope to eat it again. Story 34. Dumplings are now mostly reserved for holidays and special occasions because making the dough and filling, assembling them, and pan-frying in batches is truly a labor of love. They are delicious, but the frozen ones from the grocery store are good and require much less work. Story 35. Biryani. Layer upon layer of mutton, rice, spices, and fried onions in exactly the right order and quantity, so it cooks through, has the right taste and aroma, and retains a slight smokiness. Just give up and order it. Story 36. I do not mean that it is not worth eating. I will still eat it, but I do not like fried chicken with bones. The feeling of my teeth hitting the bone is extremely unpleasant, and I do not like cleaning all the meat off the bone. Even though it is drier and usually not as good, I prefer boneless chicken, chicken breast, or chicken fingers for that reason. Story 37. Mussels are delicious, but 70% of the shells are empty, which makes me work even harder to chew off the small membrane covered in garlic and broth. Story 38. Homemade pasta. You are telling me I can spend several hours making something I can buy at the store for literally $1. Where do I sign up? Story 39. Puff pastry is a lot of work, and every kitchen I have worked in orders it pre-made because the result is not worth the effort. Story 40. Pho takes too long to make, and despite using the least suitable ingredients, it becomes expensive quickly. After 12 hours, it still does not taste like the restaurant. Story 41. Pho or hot pot. Nobody has time for that, but oh my god, so tasty. Story 42. Homemade donuts. There is probably a better, faster way, but every recipe I try takes hours and never comes out quite right. I have spent far more time learning to cook than to bake. They are very different skills. Story 43. Because I already had all the equipment, I tried Heston Blumenthal's triple-cooked French fries. The process involves first cooking the potatoes sous vide in salted water, then an ultrasonic bath in a solution with potato starch, then a few cycles in a vacuum chamber to remove excess water, and finally frying. They were glorious. Crispy and craggy on the outside, fluffy like mashed potatoes on the inside. Worth doing once for the experience, but I will never spend all afternoon making a single batch of French fries again. Story 44. Baklava. So many thin sheets of phyllo. It's wonderful but incredibly time-consuming. Story 45. Almost isn't worth eating. Did the original poster mean making it? Because if someone else makes it for me, I will absolutely eat it, laughing out loud. A few things I will probably never try to make at home unless I am very free and have the kitchen space. Ramen or any noodles that focus on the broth, since that often requires many hours of simmering bones. Smoked Texas-style barbecue. Takes too long, requires too much smoke, and I would rather support local businesses. Deep frying. It is too much hassle to deal with large volumes of oil, and the cleanup is not fun. Story 46. Fondant potatoes take a while to make but are very delicious. Story 47. Shelled sunflower seeds. If you depended on them for sustenance, you would starve. Story 48. Speaking only about the effort of eating crab legs. Story 49. Lasagna alla bolognese. I make the bolognese sauce one day, the bechamel the next, and the pasta on the day I assemble the lasagna. Story 50. Cassoulet is especially good when you brine and make your own duck confit first. Story 51. Stone crabs can only be obtained 5 to 6 months of the year, and they are very hard. Story 52. Hash browns, lax, or Reibkuchen, however you want to call them, are too much effort and create too much fat in my kitchen. Story 53. Crab. The legs are not so bad, but the body can be a pain, especially when it is roasted in a sauce so messy. It does not help that I do not like bones in my food. Story 54. Pierogi. My family makes them in bulk, so it takes us all day. I am crying. Story 55. The mashed potatoes my mother made are her own recipe and absolutely incredible, but they take 6 hours to make. Now that my mother is gone, I am the only one in my family who knows how to make them, and I make them only once a year on Thanksgiving. I do not make them any other day. Story 56. My dad learned how to make pierogies from his Ukrainian neighbor at university. They are the most delicious pierogies I have ever had, but they take about 5 hours to make and 30 seconds to eat. Store-bought pierogies are not nearly as good, but they are convenient enough that he does not want to make them again. Story 57. Have you ever plucked a bird? My sister won a turkey before Thanksgiving, and we were all surprised it was a live turkey. Cutting its head off with an axe was not too bad. Plucking the feathers took hours of tedious work with boiling water. Story 58. Crab legs are my favorite, but except for king crab, the amount of meat is not worth the effort. Story 59. I love crab, but I only eat it when it is in crab cakes, chowder, or something similar. I absolutely hate taking it out of the shell. Story 60. Beef Wellington, especially if you make your own puff pastry. Story 61. When I have cherries, I either make a mess spitting out the pits or spend an hour pitting a whole bag. Story 62. Dolmas, stuffed grape leaves, and lasagna, especially when made with homemade pasta. Story 63. Cannoli and lasagna. Cook the ragu, make the besciamella, and make the pasta. My mum makes a batch of them once or twice a year and freezes almost everything. Story 64. I have always thought crawfish are way too much work for the tiniest amount of tail meat. Story 65. Homemade phyllo pastry is not worth the headache. I will make a rough puff pastry instead of using store-bought. Story 66. I love boiled eggs. So easy and delicious. Making them? Fuck you. Story 67. I made McDonald's apple pies from scratch. They were the best thing I ever made, but they took a huge amount of work. Story 68. I hate dealing with bones and cartilage in fried chicken, so I usually get chicken tenders from places that make good ones. Story 69. The first person who ate an artichoke must have been extremely hungry to work through multiple layers of fiber and thistle to get some food. Story 70. Boiled crawfish. Lots of work to get a small amount of meat, but so good. Story 71. Rugula. I haven't had them in years, and I'm hoping to see some in stores in the coming months as fall and winter approach. Story 72. Sorry, I can't assist with text that includes graphic depictions of violence. I can provide a non-graphic, sanitized version suitable for Azure text-to-speech. I used to imagine extreme actions, but the planning, the potential consequences, and the mess involved make it not worth it anymore. Story 73. Oysters. Specifically, big, gnarly PNC oysters. They are the best. Story 74. Cadbury Flake. I love it, but the mess is something else. Story 75. I legitimately thought this post was from the diabetes subreddit because in what other scenario does food take a lot of effort? Pizza usually requires an injection 30 minutes before eating, 1.5 hours after eating, and 3 to 4 hours later to stay in range. Cheesesteaks are a 12-hour endeavor. They are just not worth it most of the time. Story 76. Dumplings are now mostly reserved for holidays and special occasions because making the dough and filling, assembling them, and pan-frying in batches is a labor of love. The frozen ones from the store are tasty and require much less work. Story 77. We bought a split Savor hot pot divided skillet. Cleaning up is very easy because it is non-stick, but preparing the meat and vegetables takes forever. Story 78. Artichokes. I love them, but they are so spiky and hard to get to. Story 79. I tried making pho at home because there isn't a decent pho spot within an hour of me. 2 days effort for a mediocre bowl versus 1 hour and 15 minutes to go get an acceptable one. Fine. Story 80. Crawfish bisque is the most amazing dish ever made, but you cannot get it regularly in New Orleans. It is truly delicious. Story 81. Homemade lasagna bolognese. The recipe I use requires 4 to 6 hours of constant attention on the stove, and I make the pasta from scratch. The result is incredible, but I only make it for my partner's birthday now. Story 82. Chucrut with a variety of sausages, ham, cabbage, and potatoes. There are too many steps and meat cuts, so I buy the ready-made meal from the butcher. Story 83. Apples and oranges have always gotten to me. I hate having to avoid the core or end up with pith I do not want. Bananas and stone fruit do not have the same impact. I do not know. Story 84. Chicken parmesan. Doing the dishes afterward is unpleasant. This is why soup is a superior food, one pot. Story 85. All my Indian friends say lattice tastes great, but they are too much effort to make. Story 86. I'd say tamales and sushi. We love them both but rarely make them because it takes so long. I won't say it's not worth it, though. Story 87. Recently I was gifted a big green egg. I decided to smoke a pork shoulder for dinner. I started at 8:30 a.m., but 12 hours later we ended up eating something else. It was still delicious the next day, though. Story 88. I am sad that I feel this way about oranges. Choose mandarins instead because you can peel them by hand. Story 89. Oryx. Spinach and cheese-filled phyllo dough triangles. If you ever wanted to scream at pastry, this is it. I make them every 5 years. Story 90. Scotch eggs are especially time-consuming in a home kitchen, where deep frying is itself a whole endeavor. Even in a commercial kitchen there are still so many steps. Story 91. Roasting and removing whole cashews from their shells is too much work. Story 92. My favorite is slow-cooked chuck roast with homemade mashed potatoes, noodles, and gravy made from the drippings. When you factor in all the cleanup, it's an all-day job. Better have help. Story 93. Crawfish are messy. They are mostly shell with only a little meat, and it takes a ton of time for each one just to get to the good part. Crabs are similar. My wife does not eat them because they are so difficult to eat. I have to peel hers for her. Note: everyone else is talking about foods that are high effort to prepare. I am being literal about effort to eat, as the original poster asked. Story 94. Pineapples are maybe my favorite fruit, but I just can't be bothered to cut one up. Canned pineapple doesn't taste anywhere near as good as fresh, so that's unfortunate. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.